Outnumbered 2-1, and with their backs against the James River, the African-American troops of the 1st and 10th United States Colored Infantry faced the charging Confederates. If they broke, if they tried to flee, they would all be killed or taken into slavery. So they held ranks, they leveled their muskets, they opened fire. Supporting the troops from the James River was the U.S. Navy gunboat USS Dawn, which mounted as its main armament a 100-pounder or 6.4-inch Parrott rifle. That 100-pounder, U.S. Navy Registry number 206, still exists and is displayed in front of the old jail in York, Maine. USS Dawn had been built as a merchant steamer in New York in 1857. In April of 1861, she was one of many merchant ships purchased into service as the U.S. Navy rapidly expanded to enforce the blockade. USS Dawn's initial service was as part of the South Atlantic Blockading Squadron on the South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida coasts. Here she participated in the bombardments of Fort McAllister in January and February 1863. She assisted in the destruction of the Confederate privateer Nashville as well. In late 1863, she returned to New York for repairs. Her armament was taken off while she was in the shipyard, and when she recommissioned at the end of the year, she received new guns, including 100-pounder Parrott rifle number 206, the one displayed in York. After returning to service, USS Dawn was sent to the James River in Virginia. It was here on May 24, 1864, that USS Dawn was at Wilson's Wharf on the James, where the 1st and 10th United States Colored Infantry were constructing a set of defenses there to be called Fort Pocahontas. And the presence of these armed African-American soldiers so near Richmond alarmed authorities there. They dispatched Confederate Major General Fitzhugh Lee and 3 brigades of cavalry to attack the fort. Fitzhugh Lee's dismounted cavalry made an attack on the fort which was unsuccessful, and Fitzhugh Lee sent a message to the commander of the fort, Brigadier General Edward Wild, that if the soldiers there did not immediately surrender, he could not be responsible for the consequences. Wild was a bit of a character. A homeopathic physician from Massachusetts, he had served with the Ottoman army during the Crimean War. At the beginning of the American Civil War, he had volunteered as an infantry officer with a Massachusetts regiment. He lost an arm at the Battle of South Mountain. Wild had assisted Colonel Robert Shaw in finding officers for the 54th Massachusetts, and he had gone on to raise a brigade of African-American troops. His operations made him notorious in the eyes of the Confederate leadership, particularly because of his December 1863 raid into North Carolina, where he and his troops liberated over 2,000 enslaved persons. Wild, now at Fort Pocahontas, could be in no doubt of the consequences of the fort being taken, and with the Battle of Fort Pillow in such recent memory, neither could his soldiers. But General Wild, hearing the demand and the threat to the lives of every man under his command, took an envelope from his pocket, scratched the words, "We will try it," and sent that to General Fitzhugh Lee. It's a move reminiscent of General McAuliffe at Bastogne in 1944, replying nuts to the German commander's demand for surrender. And just like at Bastogne, the U.S. Army would hold fast. Captain Edward Simonton, one of the first United States Colored Infantry's officers, wrote of the battle, "On the receipt of General Wild's answer to his demand for surrender, the enemy began to attack our position. Dismounting their men, they first made a feint attack on the left and center of our line, and then made a direct charge on our right. The surrounding woods favored the enemy so that they were able to advance quite near our works before the fire from our line could have much effect on them. But as some of the Johnnies showed themselves to our view, they received a destructive fire from our line. Still the enemy charged on with a yell, firing all the time as they advanced, and seemed confident of their ability to drive all of our force into the river. Then it was that our warriors showed their fighting qualities. They stood their ground firmly, firing volley after volley into the ranks of the advancing foe. Many of the Johnnies had succeeded in approaching quite near our line. The artillery stationed in our works then threw grape and canister into their ranks. Again, the brave and determined foe rallied under the frantic efforts of their officers. Again, their ranks were scattered and torn by our deadly fire. Next, the gunboat in the river began to throw shells into their already demoralized ranks. When they broke and fled in disorder to the rear, then our soldiers poured into their ranks a final volley, and this was the last of the fight. USS Dawn moved up and down the James River abreast of Fort Pocahontas throughout the battle, seeking to find the best position during each phase of the fight to take the Confederate troopers under fire. USS Dawn and its crew fired their 100-pounder Parrott rifle, their 20-pounder Parrott rifle, and their 12-pounder Dahlgren boat rifle at the Confederate cavalry. Those troopers were unfamiliar with being under such heavy artillery. One Confederate trooper remembered that the shells were as great as black masses, as big as nail kegs, hurtling in the air and making the earth tremble under us and the atmosphere jar and quake around us when they burst. At times during the battle, the sailors of USS Dawn were taken under fire by Confederate troopers ashore, but they silenced those sharpshooters with their return fire. Fitzhugh Lee had been dispatched by Confederate authorities to destroy this threat of armed African-American soldiers so close to Richmond. Instead, it was his command that smashed against the determined resistance of the men of the 1st and 10th United States Colored Infantry, who knew that they were fighting for their lives and their freedom as well as for the cause of liberty. This first encounter between the elite cavalry of the Army of Northern Virginia and the United States Colored troops at the Battle of Wilson's Wharf had a significance beyond its relatively small size. Although the newspapers in Richmond found excuses for the defeat, the fact that the Confederate troopers had been soundly beaten by an outnumbered group of African-American soldiers underlined the fact that these men were very willing and quite capable of fighting for their freedom and for Union victory. The 1st United States Colored Infantry would go on to serve in the Petersburg Campaign before being sent to take part in the successful capture of Fort Fisher and the campaign to take Wilmington, North Carolina. They, alongside their brigade, are honored by the sculpture Boundless by the artist Stephen Hayes at the site of the Battle of Forks Road in Wilmington, North Carolina. The sculpture, showing a file of African-American soldiers, was installed in 2021 and is adjacent to the Cameron Art Museum. The names of the members of the 1st United States Colored Infantry at the time of that battle are engraved on the far side of the statue. The sailors of USS Dawn had fought bravely as well, firing 118 rounds from their 3 rifled guns during the battle. Dawn's captain lamented not having any smoothbore cannons aboard, as his ship had been close enough to the action to be effective firing canister at the attacking Confederates. 2 of USS Dawn's 3 guns seemed to survive to present. One of the 3 20-pounders on display in South Berwick, Maine, around a monument, was carried aboard USS Dawn, as well as the 100-pounder in front of the old jail in York, Maine. Many thanks to author John Weaver for stopping in York, Maine to take the photos of the 100-pounder Parrott in front of the old jail there. John is the author of A Legacy in Brick and Stone, a fabulous book on America's coastal defense forts of its third system, which were so critical to the American Civil War. If you're interested in those forts, I highly recommend the book to you. 100-pounder Parrott rifle number 206 in front of the old jail in York, Maine is a monument both to the sailors of USS Dawn and the troops of the 1st and 10th United States Colored Infantry who fought for their lives and for their freedom and the freedom of others at Fort Pocahontas during the Battle of Wilson's Wharf on May 24, 1864. If you are interested in more stories of the American Civil War and the U.S. Navy during the 19th century, visit santee1821.net or my Facebook or YouTube pages. Thank you.